Well, good afternoon, brethren. I'm going to give a short, to the point message about the Amalekites. You can receive a much longer message on the same subject by going to ucg.org. And they have quite a bit of information there. But what I share, or what I intend to share with you today, I want to emphasize because it comes directly out of God's Word. Please turn to Exodus 17. Oh, and I didn't show you. This is my tried and true, well-worn, new King James Bible. Okay, Exodus 17 and verse 1, and I'll begin reading right there. Exodus 17, verse 1. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin. Doesn't mean sin like you're thinking, but the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Eternal commanded. They camped at Rephidim, but there was no water there for them, the people, to drink. The Israelites had just escaped from Egypt. You know that. You know that. Across the Red Sea, following 10 incredible miracles that had literally forced Egypt to release the miserable Israelite slaves. And they were on the move, but they really had no time to think about all the miracles that God had performed for them. They just knew that they were getting out of town then. Verses 2 through 7 show how the Israelite, they were exhausted. It shows Israelite weakness and Israelite literal thirst. But these verses also show, and I'm not going to read them, but these verses also show that God has a way to care for the people that he loves and is going to take care of. We'll not discuss Israel's lack of faith. I mean, they shouldn't have had a lack of faith, but we're not going to talk about that right now. But it's obvious if you read those scriptures. Instead, we'll begin by reading at verse 8. An obvious break has occurred in the thought at verse 8. The subject changes radically here. Exodus 17, verse 8 through 13, again in the New King James Version. Now Amalek, verse 8, now Amalek came and fought with Israel in Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose us some men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow, I, Moses, will stand on the top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him, and he fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. And so it was when Moses held up his hands that Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands, plural, became heavy. So they took a stone and they put it under him and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands or his arms, one on each side and the one on the other. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. So Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. Now that's an unusual way to win a battle, right? Really unusual way to win a battle. But when God tells you to do something, guess what? You're supposed to do it. And if you follow God's instructions, you win. But let's read verse 14 now. A little bit of a change. Then the Eternal said to Moses, write this for a memorial in the book, and recount it in the hearing of Joshua, that I, God, will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. Wow. God says that he will eliminate Amalek. He will do it. I want us to think about what that might mean, but I'm not going to speculate about that in any case. As I said at the start, much more can be learned by typing Amalek at ucg.org. A lot of good information. Do it. Now let's go to 1 Samuel 14. 1 Samuel 14 and 15. And in 1 Samuel, I want to start reading at 1 Samuel 14. I want to read verses 47 and 48. 1 Samuel 14, 47 and 48. So Saul established a sovereignty over Israel. This is quite a ways down the road. We know a lot of stuff has happened in the interval. Saul had established a sovereignty over Israel, and he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the people of Ammon, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, and against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he harassed them. Verse 48, and he gathered an army and attacked the Amalekites and delivered Israel from the hands of those who plundered them. Now, so far, so good, right? So far, so good. He did what God said. At least physically in battle. Physically in battle. But as most of us know, Saul did not do all or everything right. He started thinking on his own. Now let's read 1 Samuel 15, verses 1, 2, and 3. I have to share something with you. Over the years that I've read these verses, it's been a while, they remain in my head the hardest to read, the hardest to hear, the hardest to accept, but they can be explained. Verse 1, 1 Samuel 15. Samuel also said to Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore, heed the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he ambushed them on the way when Israel came up out of Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek, and this is the part that hurts me, and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them. Kill both men, women, infant and nursing child, ox, sheep, camel, and donkey. It's always, certainly, from the first time I heard it until today, God told Saul to utterly wipe out Amalek. Now, I'm going to break into my message right now. Break into my message and remind us all about the main point of the 8th day of the feast. God, both Father and Son, will offer salvation to anyone who will obey their law their way. We heard this preached loud and clear at St. George at the feast. I hope you heard it. All resurrected people who are taught God's truth and agree to it and live it can be saved. Now let's read 1 Samuel 15, verses 5 to 9. Notice in particular verse 9. Verse 5. And Saul came to the city of Amalek, and he lay in wait in the valley And then Saul said to the Kenites, Susanna and I have some friends called the Kenites, but not the same people, but I just had to throw that in. I'm sorry, Father. Okay. Go, depart, get out from among the Amalekites, lest I destroy you with them. For you showed kindness to all the children of Israel when they came up out of Egypt. So the Kenites departed from among the Amalekites. Verse 7, and Saul attacked the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He also took Agag, king of the Amalekites, alive and utterly destroyed all the people with the edge of the sword. Uh-oh. Saul messed up. Saul messed up. Saul decides for himself. He decides for himself. He doesn't do what God through Samuel told him to do. Now let's read 1 Samuel 15, 10 to 25. Now the word of the Eternal came to Samuel, saying, this is God speaking, I greatly regret that I have set up Saul as king, for he has turned back from following me, and he has not performed my commandments. This grieved Samuel, and he cried out to the Eternal all night. So when Samuel rose early in the morning to meet Saul, it was told Samuel, saying, Saul went up to Carmel, and indeed, he set up a monument for himself. Cool. And he has gone around and passed by, and he's come down to Gilgal. And then Samuel, verse 13, then Samuel went to Saul, and Saul said to him, blessed are you of the Lord. I have performed the commandment of the Lord. But Samuel said, what then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? And Saul said, they, who's the they? They have brought them from the Amalekites. For the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. And the rest we have utterly destroyed. And then Samuel said to Saul, be quiet, and I will tell you what the Eternal said to me last night. And Saul says, speak on. So Samuel said, when you were little in your own eyes, were you not head? Were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not the Eternal anoint you king over Israel? Now the Eternal sent you on a mission and said, go and utterly destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. Why then did you not obey the voice of the Eternal? Why did you swoop down on the spoil and do evil in the sight of the Eternal? And Saul said to Samuel, but, I have obeyed the voice of the Eternal and gone on the mission on which the Eternal sent me. And I brought back Agag, king of Amalek, and I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the plunder, the sheep and oxen and the best of the things which should have been utterly destroyed. Whoa, he acknowledges what he did wrong, to sacrifice to the Eternal. And then I like this, your God, not my God, in Gilgal. Now, let's finish up. I'll read 1 Samuel 15, 10 through 23. It's kind of long. I know it's kind of long, but I'm going to get out of here pretty quick. Verse 10. I already read some of that, so we don't have to spend as much time. Let's go down to verse 16. Then Samuel said to Saul, be quiet. I like that part. Be quiet, and I'll tell you what the Eternal said to me last night. And Saul said, speak on. So Samuel said, you know, you were humble. You're not anymore. Verse 20, and Saul said to Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Eternal, and I've gone on the mission, and I just brought back Agag. Verse 22, so Samuel says, verse 22, skipping down to verse 22, sorry about that. So Samuel said, has the Eternal as great a delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Eternal? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed, to pay attention to what God says, is better than the fat of rams. Verse 23, for rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Eternal, he also has rejected you from being king. Brethren, this is God's justice. It's still true today. We must heed it. My time's up. There are several important, meaningful prophetic lessons in these verses, but we can discuss them later, if you want, in message chat.